The grand palace of Valerian floated high above its planet, shining with golden towers and crystal domes. Inside the royal hall, Princess Leora stood silent as her father, the Velari king, announced something that shook her world. "You will marry a human. This is the price for peace." Leora's bright violet eyes widened. Her long silver hair fell over her shoulders as she stepped forward, stunned. "Father, no, you can't. It is not a request," he said calmly. "The council has agreed. This union will end the war." For years, the Velari and humans had fought across the stars. Many lives had been lost. Finally, peace talks had begun. But trust was weak. So, to show unity, both sides agreed on something bold: a royal marriage between their species. Leora was the youngest royal daughter, known for her sharp mind and strong voice. She had trained in diplomacy, not love. To her, humans were loud, wild, and unpredictable. She had never met one in person, and now she was expected to marry one. "No Velari would accept this," she whispered, trying to control her breath. Her father looked at her with tired eyes. "That is why it must be you. You are strong enough." Some nobles in the court looked away, ashamed or scared. Others nodded in quiet agreement. Leora knew she couldn't fight this now. Refusing could destroy the peace. She bowed her head slightly. "I will obey the order." Far away on Earth, a man named Jace was fixing his small shuttle in a dusty repair yard. He had no idea his life was about to change forever. He was once a war pilot, now just a quiet man who preferred peace. But that peace wouldn't last. A loud hum shook the ground as a sleek government shuttle landed nearby. Two officers stepped out. Jace Carter, one of them asked. He stood up slowly, wiping grease off his hands. "Yeah. You've been selected by Earth's council. You are to represent humanity in a royal union. You're going to marry the Velari princess." Jace stared at them like they were joking. "What?" "It's official. Pack your things. You leave in 12 hours. Jace looked at his ship, then at the sky. He had seen war, seen death, and now, peace wanted to dress up as a wedding. He didn't want fame. He didn't want politics. But maybe, just maybe, this was a way to stop more bloodshed. He nodded slowly. "All right. I'll go." On opposite sides of the galaxy, two lives were moving toward one another. One was a proud alien princess. The other, a human who had stopped fighting. Neither knew what was coming next, but their meeting would change the galaxy forever. Jace Carter stood in the center of his small home, staring at the packed bag on his table. Everything had changed in one night. Just yesterday, he was fixing broken engines and enjoying the quiet life. Now he was being flown to a space station to meet. No, Mary, an alien princess. It still didn't feel real. "Why me?" he asked the officer beside him. "You're a war hero. You fought with honor. The council believes you're the perfect symbol of peace." Jace laughed, but it had no joy. "I'm no symbol. I just survived." The officer didn't respond. Instead, he led Jace into the shuttle. The inside was polished and bright, nothing like Jace's dusty ship. He sat down, buckled in, and looked out the window one last time. As the engines roared and the shuttle lifted off, Earth grew smaller below. Jace's hand tightened around the small photo of his family, now gone. He whispered to himself, "I hope this is worth it." Far away, on the royal vessel Virelin, Princess Leora stood before a mirror. Her attendants placed layers of blue silk over her shoulders, fixed her jewelry, and adjusted her crown. She didn't move. Her face was calm, but inside, she felt like a prisoner. Her marriage was planned, her future already chosen. She had read files about the human. Jace Carter, no noble blood, no royal training. A simple man, a soldier. She expected someone loud, proud, and uncultured. "He is not fit to marry a Velari," she said softly. One of her attendants, an older woman named Serin, spoke gently. "Perhaps he will surprise you, Princess." Leora gave her a sharp look. I do not want surprises. I want control. You are not alone in this, Sorin replied with a kind smile. You have a voice, even now. Use it. Leora turned back to the mirror. I will not bow to a human. Not today. Not ever. As both ships moved toward the neutral zone, tension filled the air. News of the wedding had spread across many systems. On Earth, people argued whether this marriage was a good idea. On Valerian, nobles whispered about shame and weakness. But the leaders of both worlds had made their decision. Jace arrived at the space station first. The station was massive, floating in the emptiness of space, lit by thousands of lights. He stepped out, wearing a clean black uniform, simple but respectful. He looked around at the alien designs, glowing patterns, and floating paths. It was all new, strange, and beautiful. And then she arrived. Princess Leora stepped out of her ship with slow, graceful steps. Her dress flowed like water, her silver hair glowing under the station lights. She held her head high, her face unreadable. Jace stared, not out of fear or pride, but with calm curiosity. So, you're the princess, he said casually. Leora blinked. She had expected a bow, or silence, or fear. Instead, she found herself speechless. The room was quiet. Princess Leora stood tall, her hands folded in front of her. Her dress shimmered like starlight, and her silver crown reflected the soft lights of the space station. She looked like a goddess from another world. But her mind was racing. The human was nothing like she expected. Jace stood just a few steps away, wearing a plain black uniform. He didn't bow. He didn't act nervous. He looked her straight in the eyes and smiled. So, you're the princess, he said again, a bit softer now. Leora opened her mouth, but no words came. She had prepared strong phrases, royal greetings, and maybe a warning, but those thoughts vanished. She had faced generals and leaders. But the grand hall aboard the space station was massive, with floating chandeliers that shone like distant stars. Rows of alien delegates and human representatives filled the space, their eyes fixed on the central platform. At the front, an altar gleamed, ready for the historic union. Leora stood at the edge of the platform, her hands resting lightly at her sides. Her dress flowed around her like liquid light, and her crown shimmered, catching the soft glow from the chandeliers. Her posture was perfect, every inch of her royal. But inside, she was a storm of confusion. She had never imagined this moment. Her entire life had been one of control and power, taught to rule with strength and clarity. Yet here she was, standing before a human, about to marry him for the sake of peace. She could still feel Jace's gaze earlier, not filled with awe, but simply curiosity. His smile had thrown her off guard. He hadn't feared her, hadn't been intimidated by her title or status. The moment he had spoken his first words, her expectations had shattered. He was nothing like the humans she'd been taught to fear. But still, could this really work? Could she truly marry someone who had no royal blood, no ties to her world? As the ceremony began, Leora's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Jace walked toward her, his gaze steady but kind. His simple black uniform stood in stark contrast to her royal attire, but there was no discomfort in his expression. He wasn't pretending to be anything he wasn't. The ceremony's officiant, a neutral alien, began speaking in formal tones. The union of Princess Leora of Valerian and Jace Carter of Earth is hereby sealed. Will you both vow to respect and uphold the peace between your people? Leora's throat felt dry. She was supposed to say the right words, to make this moment perfect. But as she looked at Jace, she found that she didn't know what to say anymore. I will, she whispered, her voice steady but quiet. Jace nodded, then met her eyes. I will too. And just like that, the universe watched as the first human and alien marriage took place, one that had been forced by politics, yet somehow felt real. The officiant raised his hand, signaling the final step. Then, By the power vested in me by the Galactic Union, I now pronounce you." Before he could finish, Jace spoke up, his voice strong and clear. "Actually, I don't like the idea of this being a duty. I think we should choose this." Leora blinked, surprised at the unexpected challenge to tradition. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she was unsure whether he was going to ruin everything. But Jace continued, his tone soft but firm. "We don't have to follow all these rules. We can make our own choice. We're not just going through motions. We're making a promise." He glanced at her, then added, "That's what I think." A quiet murmur passed through the audience, but Leora's mind was already racing. In that moment, she realized something. Jace wasn't asking for her to be his equal in title. He was asking for her to be his equal in heart. And something in her stirred. Perhaps this could be more than a forced alliance. "Agreed," she said, her voice more confident now. She turned toward the officiant. "We choose this together." The room fell silent, and for the first time, Leora smiled, not the polite smile of a princess, but one of true understanding. A choice had been made, and it was only the beginning. The days following the ceremony were tense. The union of Princess Leora and Jace Carter had been broadcasted across galaxies, but the moment of celebration quickly turned into one of quiet separation. They were married, but neither seemed to know exactly how to proceed. Leora sat in her personal chamber aboard the royal vessel Varellin, staring out of the large glass window that overlooked the endless stars. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers twitching with uncertainty. She had spent years preparing to rule a kingdom, to understand the politics of the galaxy. But this was different. This wasn't about treaties or alliances. This was about something she had never been taught to understand: human emotions. She could feel his presence outside the door, just beyond the thick metal walls. Jace had respected her wishes to remain separate, a decision that surprised her. He had not pushed. He had not insisted on any form of intimacy or comfort. He simply existed in the same space as her, but there was a barrier between them that neither could cross. Jace, meanwhile, was sitting in the common room of the ship, sipping a cup of strange, dark liquid. He wasn't sure what it was, some alien drink, but it didn't matter. His mind was elsewhere. The past few days had been filled with formalities, speeches, and expectations. But despite being married to an alien princess, he couldn't help but feel more alone than ever. The quiet distance between them was impossible to ignore. Lyra's coldness wasn't a matter of disdain. He knew that. It was her way of keeping control, of maintaining the distance that had been part of her life for so long. But Jace wasn't sure how long he could take it. He had spent his life fighting battles, yes, but this was different. He sighed and stood, walking to the door of his quarters. With a simple press of a button, it slid open. He hesitated, then stepped into the corridor, determined to speak with her. Leora turned as the door to her chamber opened. She hadn't expected him to come. In fact, she had hoped for some more time to think things through alone. But here he was, standing at the doorway with that same calm expression he always wore. "You came," she said, not with surprise, but with a quiet acknowledgement. Jace leaned against the doorframe, his eyes not on her, but on the stars beyond the window. "I thought it might be time to talk. We've been keeping our distance long enough." Lyra's eyes flickered to the floor. She wanted to say something sharp, something that would keep her in control. But instead, she found herself struggling to find the right words. "Why don't you just come in?" she finally asked, surprising both of them. Jace's face softened as he stepped inside. He didn't move too close, respecting the space she seemed to need. But for the first time, he truly saw her, really saw her. Not as a princess or as a symbol of peace, but as a woman who had been forced into something she didn't choose. "I don't want to push you," he said, his voice low. "But maybe, just maybe, we can try to understand each other a little more." Leora stayed silent for a long moment, the words hanging between them. She hadn't expected this honesty, this softness, And for the first time in days, she let her guard drop, just a little. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Maybe we can start there." They stood together, not touching, but for the first time, they felt closer than ever. Two people, so different, yet learning to find common ground in the silence. The quiet peace that had settled over the royal vessel Varellin didn't last long. It had been only a few days since the wedding, and while Lyora and Jace had taken small steps toward understanding each other, the galaxy was not so forgiving. One evening, as the stars outside glittered like diamonds, a sharp alarm blared throughout the ship. Lyora was in her quarters, staring out of the window, when the sudden noise cut through the calm. Her body tensed, and she stood quickly, reaching for the communicator on the wall. "Princess, we've detected an unknown ship entering our territory." Her advisor's voice came through, breathless. "It's a pirate vessel. They're heading straight for us." Lyora's heart skipped a beat. Pirates weren't uncommon in the outer reaches of space, but this close to the royal fleet, it was unheard of. She didn't waste time. She immediately turned toward the door and hurried out into the hallway, her mind racing. Jace was already there, walking toward her with purpose. He'd heard the alarm too. He was dressed in his casual uniform, but there was no mistaking the look in his eyes. He was ready for action. "What's happening?" he asked, falling in step beside her. "We've got pirates incoming," Lyora replied, her voice tight. "They're heading straight for us." Jace didn't flinch. He had fought in wars, faced dangers far worse than pirates. But what he didn't expect was the way the princess was handling this. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't ordering anyone around in a cold, royal manner. She was calm, focused. "Do you have a plan?" Jace asked, stopping in front of the command center's entrance. Lyora nodded. "I'll take command of the defense, but I could use your help." For the first time, Jace saw the true leader in her. She wasn't just a princess following orders. She was in control of the situation, her mind working quickly as she prepared for what was about to come. She wasn't asking him to fight for her. She was asking him to fight with her. They rushed into the command center, where the crew was already preparing for battle. The pirate ship was closing in fast, and the crew was scrambling to position the shields. Jace stepped beside one of the officers, his fingers flying over the controls. He trained as a pilot and mechanic, and this wasn't too different from flying in a battle. But this time, he wasn't alone. This time, Lyora was right there beside him. "Give me a direct connection to the ship's weapons system," Jace ordered. The officer nodded, quickly granting him access. "We're not just defending. We're going to stop them before they get too close." Lyora glanced at him. She didn't speak, but there was a silent understanding. He wasn't just here to protect her. He was here to fight with her, to defend their people, to defend their ship. The pirate ship came into range, firing wildly. The first blast hit their shields, sending a shock through the vessel. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, but Jace's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Target their engines. We can't let them retreat." Lyora turned to the weapons officer. "Lock onto their engines. Fire at will." The energy pulses from their ship flew across the dark expanse, hitting the pirate vessel with precision. In moments, the pirate ship's engines exploded in a fiery burst, sending the ship veering off course. Jace and Lyora stood together, their faces illuminated by the flashing lights of the control panels. The danger wasn't over, but for now, they had won. "Nice shot," Jace said, turning to her with a grin. Lyora allowed herself a small smile. "We make a good team." And for the first time, she felt a connection with him that went beyond duty, beyond their marriage. This was more than a political union. This was partnership. And it was only the beginning. The days after the pirate attack were filled with silence, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. There was a shift in the air, something that Lyora couldn't ignore. It was a shift inside her, something that had started during the battle. She had fought alongside Jace, and in that moment, she realized something. She had been raised to believe that strength came from control, from ruling with an iron fist. But Jace didn't lead with power or force. He led with action, with calm decisions in the heat of battle. He fought not for victory, but for the people beside him. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had taken charge when they were under attack, how he had worked with her, not for her. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had grown up in the palace, surrounded by advisors who told her what to do, what to say. Her entire life had been planned out for her. She had been trained to be the perfect ruler, to carry her kingdom on her shoulders. But Jace made her question everything. She stood in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Her thoughts were tangled. She had a duty to her people, to her kingdom. But she also had a growing curiosity about this human who had become her husband. Jace appeared behind her, his footsteps light on the metal floor. "I thought I'd find you here." Leora didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She could feel his presence, steady and calm. He wasn't pushing her for anything. He wasn't asking her to be someone she wasn't. He was just there. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about everything." "Everything?" Jace asked, his voice low and curious. Leora nodded. "About the war, the marriage, about how I've been taught to rule. I've spent my whole life believing one thing. And now, I don't know anymore." Jace stepped closer, but still, he kept his distance. He wasn't crowding her, just giving her space to speak. "What do you believe now?" he asked. Leora took a deep breath. "I don't know. I've been taught that a ruler must be strong, unyielding. But you're different. You don't lead with fear. You lead with your actions. You don't have to command respect. You earn it." Jace was silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm not perfect, Leora. I've made mistakes, and I've had to learn the hard way. But maybe leadership doesn't have to be about control. Maybe it's about trust and partnership." Leora turned to face him, her heart beating faster. "Partnership?" "Yeah," Jace said with a slight smile. "We're in this together, whether we like it or not. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Not about being the strongest, not about being the smartest, but about being there for each other." Leora's eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. But there was none, just calm certainty. For the first time, Leora felt something shift within her. Not fear, not doubt, but the possibility of something new. Something she had never allowed herself to believe. She had always been the princess, the ruler, the one in control. But now, with Jace, she saw a different kind of strength, one that didn't come from power, but from trust. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice soft. Jace smiled gently. "You don't have to be ready. We'll figure it out together." And in that moment, Leora realized that she was no longer alone in this. She wasn't just the princess. She was part of something bigger, something that wasn't about control or duty. It was about connection, understanding, and the willingness to take a step into the unknown. For the first time in her life, Leora felt like she had a choice. And it was the first real choice she had ever made. The Virulin hummed with energy as it glided toward the Villari capital. The massive city of Valerian loomed ahead, its towers rising high into the sky, sparkling with the light of distant stars. It was beautiful, a sight Leora had seen countless times before, but today it felt different. She stood at the observation deck, her hands clasped behind her back. The familiar cityscape before her no longer felt like home. The thought of returning to her people, to the palace, filled her with unease. She had been raised to believe that a ruler's duty was above all else. But now, that certainty was slipping away. Beside her, Jace stood quietly, his gaze also fixed on the city. He had no ties to this place, no history with it. Yet here he was, part of it, whether he liked it or not. His presence beside her was comforting. He didn't feel like a stranger anymore. In fact, He felt more like the one person she could trust. "What are you thinking?" Jace asked, breaking the silence. Lyra glanced at him. "I'm thinking about what's waiting for us down there. The council, the nobles. They'll expect me to take charge, to lead without hesitation. I've always done it alone. But now, with you," she paused, unsure how to finish the thought. "You don't have to do it alone anymore," Jace said simply. "You don't have to carry it all." Leora nodded, though she wasn't sure how to accept his words. She had been taught to be strong, to never show weakness. But now, with him, she felt a new kind of strength, a strength that didn't come from ruling over others, but from working together. As the ship approached the capital, the tension in the air thickened. Lyora knew the council would not be pleased. She had already heard whispers about her union with Jace, and she knew many of her people saw it as a betrayal of tradition. But for the first time in her life, she didn't care about their opinions. "Are you ready?" Jace asked, his voice low. Lyra took a deep breath and turned to face him. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I will be. I have to be." The shuttle docked, and the door opened to a sea of waiting faces. The council stood in formal attire, their expressions stern. At the head of the group was her father, the Velari king, his face unreadable. Behind him, the nobles whispered among themselves, some casting curious glances at Jace, others looking away with disapproval. Lyra's heart raced, but she held her head high. She stepped forward, Jace at her side. His presence beside her was a quiet strength, and she felt a surge of confidence she hadn't expected. "Your Majesty," one of the council members began, bowing slightly, "your return is awaited." Leora nodded, her voice calm but firm. "I have returned to fulfill my duty, as always. But this time, there will be change. There will be no more living in the shadows of tradition. It's time for something new." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. She glanced at Jace, who met her gaze with a reassuring smile. "Together," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. And for the first time in her life, Leora believed it. The future wasn't about following orders or maintaining tradition. It was about making her own path, with Jace beside her. No matter what came next, they would face it together. The Velari capital buzzed with tension. Lyra could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her as she walked through the palace halls. The council had called for a meeting to discuss the aftermath of her return, and every step felt heavier than the last. Jace walked beside her, his presence a quiet comfort. He hadn't been given a place at the table with the council, but he hadn't asked for one. He understood the politics of the situation better than most. Still, he was with her every step of the way. Lyra entered the Grand Council room, where her father, King Race, sat at the head of the long table. The other council members were already seated, their eyes on her as she approached. She could feel their judgment, their disapproval. It was almost like a weight in the room, heavy and suffocating. The king didn't speak immediately. He just watched her with those stern eyes that had once made her feel small. But now she stood tall. "Sit, Leora," the king said, his voice low but commanding. She did as she was told, Jace sitting beside her. His calm presence beside her gave her strength, though the eyes of the council still felt like daggers. One of the council members, a stern older woman named Lady Vera, spoke first. "Your marriage to the human has caused a great stir among our people. Many believe it is a disgrace to the Velari bloodline." Leora felt her pulse quicken but held her ground. "This union was not only my choice, but it is also the choice that will secure the peace between our peoples. And that is the future of the Velari, the future of all our people." A murmur rippled through the room, but Lady Vera pressed on. "You speak of peace, but have you considered the long-term consequences? Your marriage will be seen as a weakness. It is not our way." "I have considered it," Leora replied, her voice steady. "But I see it differently. Our people are strong, but we cannot keep fighting wars forever. Peace is not a weakness. It is the way forward." King Rice finally spoke, his voice deep and filled with authority. Leora, you are my daughter. I raised you to rule with power, to lead our people to victory. This human marriage challenges everything we stand for. Jace looked at the king calmly. I'm not here to challenge anything. I'm here to support your daughter, to support her choice. I don't want to take anything away from your people. I want to help. The room grew silent. Leora's heart pounded in her chest. She had expected resistance, but she hadn't expected Jace to speak so openly to the council. The king's eyes narrowed as he looked at Jace. You speak as if you understand our ways, human. But you don't. You don't know what it means to lead a people, to carry the weight of a kingdom. Jace didn't flinch. No, I don't. But I do know what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. And I will fight for this peace, for both of our worlds. For the first time since the meeting began, Leora felt the sting of doubt fade away. Jace wasn't here to take her place. He wasn't here to lead her people. He was here to stand by her side. Peace will not come without sacrifice, she said firmly, looking at each member of the council. But it's worth fighting for. The room was still, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The silence stretched on, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence before change. And for the first time, Leora felt like she was the one in control, not just of her future, but of her destiny. The following days were filled with tension. The council had not fully accepted Leora's marriage to Jace, but neither had they openly rejected it. There was a quiet unrest among the nobles. But to Leora, it felt like the calm before a storm. The words spoken in that council room weighed heavily on her, but they did not break her resolve. She stood on the balcony of the royal palace, gazing out at the city of Valerian. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light over the towers. It was beautiful, but it felt distant to her now. The city had always been a symbol of power, of control. But now it felt like a place she was no longer sure she belonged. Jace appeared beside her, as he had done in the days before. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, letting her feel his presence without pressure. She had come to appreciate that about him. The way he never pushed her to speak, never forced her to explain herself. He simply waited until she was ready. What do you think is going to happen? Leora asked quietly, her voice soft in the still evening air. Jace turned his head to look at her, his eyes steady. I think you've already changed everything. You've made your choice, Leora. And whatever happens next, it's up to you and me. Together. Leora's chest tightened at his words. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a choice for herself. Not for her people, not for the expectations of the royal court, but for her. And for Jace. What if they never accept it? She asked. What if they always see us as an alliance of convenience, rather than a true bond? Jace smiled gently. Then we prove them wrong. We build something stronger than politics. We show them what it really means to lead, together. Leora turned to face him, her heart racing. His words filled her with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. She didn't need the council's approval to be strong. She didn't need to follow the path they had set for her. She could make her own choices, and in doing so, she could change the future for herself and for the galaxy. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, her fingers trembling slightly. You're right, she said softly. We've already made this choice. It's ours, and no one can take that from us. Jace's hand found hers, and for a moment, they stood there in silence, the city beneath them quiet as the stars began to appear. It was a small moment, but it felt like the beginning of something big. The future was uncertain. The council would never fully accept her marriage to a human, but it didn't matter. Because Leora had made a choice, and she would fight for that choice, with Jace by her side. As they stood together, the weight of the galaxy no longer felt so heavy. In that moment, it felt like the weight had shifted, not from a crown, not from the expectations of others, but from their shared bond. The future wasn't about power or tradition. It was about unity, trust, and love. And that, Leora realized, was the true strength of a ruler.